what are the risks of taking venture funding? I think the first risk is that you get massive dilution. So typically you could be diluted 25 to 30% in the first round of funding, and by the time you get to Series B, you are only holding less than 30 to 40%, 30% or so in your own company as a founder, and by the time you are in Series C or D, you're down to 10%. That's the risk you always bear if you are taking constant venture capital. The choice is to take, if you are highly profitable and growing rapidly, you don't have this dilemma. But if you are not that profitable, you have a choice of growing rapidly versus and owning a small share in a very large company, or owning a large share in a much smaller company. So that's the dilution, that's the risk you face. The second is the risk of loss of control, which means that when you take multiple rounds of venture funding, you and your co-founder who are on the board may be on the minority vis-a-vis venture funds together holding say 4 or 5 board seats and you holding 1 or 2 board seats. And typically, therefore, you are sort of having no control of your board, and consequently the venture funds are taking all the decisions. In such a case, to avoid such a thing, what you have to do is bootstrap, dilute only when required, focus on profitability, and break even. So these are the two things that you face. The second risk is that the venture funds have got a very aggressive growth target. This typically happens when the venture fund is sort of funding you at much higher valuations, and consequently, to achieve those valuations, the startup has to achieve unrealistic growth targets. And that unrealistic growth target sort of causes a lot more mistakes and a lot more burn, and consequently brings about the downfall of the startup. So many a times I advise founders not to focus on valuation while raising capital, but to focus on alignment with this organization. Similarly, the other two are similar things where there is excessive risk taking, and there is a difference between the objective of the startup founder and the fund. So to ensure that, again, you shouldn't focus on valuation or alignment of your interest, to make sure that your interests are more aligned with that of the venture fund, rather than just focus at the valuation that you are achieving. Also, don't get swayed by the glamour in the name. Ensure that you have your documentation, which is there, which are terms in the term sheet are standardized to the industry norms, and not sort of because you're getting a higher valuation, you're compromising on some of these. I think some of this is typically linked where startup founders take excessively high valuations and are enamored by it. They take a lot of capital, they dilute very quickly, and then they realize that the VC fund sort of is dictating terms and asking them to sort of do things which are not in line with what the original business model was, and then they have lost the core business objectives of the firm, and consequently they are burning too rapidly and crash. This has happened in case of many examples in India as well as abroad, where there are Series B or C firms which are highly successful and yet crash because of excessive risk taking.